container, this 30-foot aluminum sphere that I talked about, does become moderately radioactive, after a time, and that's going to happen in a full-scale commercial facility as well. So that's one challenge. You need to send people in to do maintenance, how are you going to do that? And they're working on that. They're working on ways to solve that problem. For one thing, it's not as intensely, it's not the same intense ionizing radiation that you get like in a fission reactor. It's much lower. So what you can do is you can take the containment chamber, you can put it on railroad tracks, basically wheel it out in a cool down yard, and you can wheel another one in. And then when it's cooled down enough, you can send people in to maintain it. So that's one way of handling the radiation. As far as containment, I've seen several schemes. One of which was it's the same scheme that they use on nuclear submarines, or same type of reactor design that they use on nuclear submarines. Basically, they use molten sulfur, or not molten sulfur, molten sodium, and the molten sodium is then used to drive to create steam in the secondary water pipes, and the steam's then used to drive turbines. So that's those are the plans that I've seen. The tricky one is you've got to cycle this thing. I forget how many times you've got to actually fire it, but I believe it's 10 times a second. And I agree, that's a major engineering challenge. What I've seen is they've got some way of puffing the pellet out and hitting it at the same time with the lasers all at once. That you're right. That's going to be a huge challenge. I don't know how they're going to solve that one, because the problem with these high-power lasers is that you can only the flash lamps, for example, you can only flash them so hard for so long before they explode. And these xenon flash lamps, when they explode big time, and glass flies everywhere. And also the lasing medium itself, the glass, when you're shocking it with this intense laser light, it begins to fatigue and fracture over time. So that's another big problem. How do you create sustainable fusion? So yeah, I mean, you definitely there's the detractors have good points. No, maybe these are confined in all this, the concept. Maybe the sustainable form will be in the form of magnetic confinement. But
Yeah, well, I generally am.
go ahead.
I'm generally supportive of research, but just that so much of research now too has got all these. All these scientists don't seem to have any devotion, or no one's doing it for the public interest. You there's just so much corporate blending of interests. It's like those assholes who announced the synthetic life thing. It was so bogus, and it's corporate marketing bullshit, and it's propaganda. They're selling a technology before they even have it, and so I guess that's why I'm a little cynical. But I mean, look, I generally supported the whole moon thing, and there's stuff worth doing and worth spending money on. I'm just not the Hairline Collider. I just thought that was kind of bogus. I mean, it's not our money, so I guess I shouldn't gripe too much, right? I don't know how much we contributed, but I don't think it was that much.
Yeah, maybe if somebody else, I've been criticized for talking too much. If somebody else wants to chime in, feel free. I'll just kick back and listen. But yeah, it's actually might be a good segue to a different topic. I saw that video that you did about the artificial life thing, and I know you really took strong exception to calling it artificial life. And I've got my own theories on that, but maybe why don't you go first? Why don't you elaborate on what you found objectionable about that announcement?
Yeah, well,
I
they
forget who
called
the lead.
synthetic, and it wasn't really a synthetic life form. I mean, it was a blueprint of an existing life form, and all they did was randomize the genetic sequence. So they created a piece of DNA. So they created a little hunk of the blueprint material that was essentially synthetic in that they created it using some other organism that wasn't creating it as part of its DNA code, but was creating it as a byproduct. I guess they do it in yeast or some kind of crap. But anyway, the same way they multiply DNA to do DNA tests. So they're using this technology we use for DNA tests to create this multiplying effect to create these little strands of DNA that were basically used a computer to design, or manufacture a sequence, and so they could actually put a piece of their own little code in there, a little piece of junk code as a signature. So that's essentially, and then they just took that and put it in a dead thing, okay, a little Frankenstein, to recharge the little dead Frankenstein. So they took a dead microbe, shoved a new chromosome in it, and created, but there was a great similarity between the existing, the dead microbe and the synthetic material they were putting into it. So it wasn't like they were going from ape and putting, snail in there or something. They were putting in enough to keep the minimum parts remanufactured, reordered them. I guess I don't know how else to put it, but yeah, they just rearranged it. It's all the same genetic material, the same necessary bits of creation are still there, of how to build something. It's just they're building it in a little bit different order. And that's not synthetic life, I guess is all I'm trying to say. And the fact that it's replicated, the little organism, when it reproduced their synthetic piece of DNA. Okay, yes, so they successfully created a synthetic piece of DNA, but they did not create a synthetic life form. It was just such a bullshit exaggeration.
Yeah, biology is not my, field of study, even on an amateur level. But I know, from what I understand, yeah, everything that you said was my take on it too. Although I did miss that subtle point that I just got now about the difference between synthetic life versus synthetic DNA. But my understanding, reading through the literature, is that one of the toughest problems in creating a cell is the cell membrane itself. It's not just the encapsulated DNA inside. Creating the cell membrane is a huge challenge, and like you said, they didn't do that. They took some modified DNA and they re-encapsulated it inside of an existing cell, and so that I don't even know if I'd go so far as to call it a synthetic cell, which they did. I mean, they made a lot of hoopla in the press announcement about the fact that it was self-replicating, which is impressive. But anyway, the
I got rid of him. Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, like I said, it's good science in the sense that what they did is a good accomplishment. Great, happy for you, but it's not. I wouldn't put it anywhere above like glow in the dark cat. You know what I mean? I mean, it's a step in the process, but it is not what they claimed it to be, and that's the part that just pissed me off. It was just all hype, way overhyped, way overstated, and it was just done that way because all these guys are basically in business. I mean, they're not just researchers working for a lab. They're this is a commercial enterprise for them. They're in this business. They intend to make money doing this, and that's what makes it all very tainted. It's not pure science for science sake. It's something entirely different, and I don't like that taint at all. Um, there's some other point I want to make on that subject too, but I don't recall. Oh yeah, the membrane thing. Yeah, I guess they call that epigenetics. Um, but yeah, there's so much to the hardware, and it's sort
Well,
of my
I think it's
perception.
called fluid mosaic, and and what really bothered me is the way that it was simplified. People say, well, you just put some soap and water and you can create cell membranes that way. And the way that it was oversimplified really bugged me. But sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. But let me prod you on with this. They made they also made a lot of noise about the fact that they had inserted like URLs and phone numbers into the genetic code, and I don't know. I guess it's kind of gimmicky. It kind of reminds me of that French scientist who created that glow in the dark cat. You know, I don't I don't know what the injecting the phone numbers into the DNA was designed to prove. They're
Yeah,
making
well,
up
that
code.
was just kind of stunty. They had their own, curriculum vitae or whatever, installed in there. Their little name, address, and tattoo. They're tattooing their new life form, with their signature seal, which is just so unscientific. Also, uh,
Here's a question
yeah.
for
So,
you,
but
John.
I think it's an interesting subject. And, sorry, I'm talking at this moment. Hey, yeah, how you doing, guys I fight with, kind of, here and there. But anyway, yeah, I'll get to you in a minute. I'll get to saying hello in a minute. Just want to finish this point because I just remembered it and I keep forgetting it. But yeah, I think that's sort of an interesting part of the biology is the fact that, okay, this chromosome thing is doing this evolving, but I think there's this whole structure that's sort of like a sperm cell, or sort of like it's a slave to the system. And so there's all these little parts that are basically, I think, incredibly primitive. I mean, I think the way the cell membrane is passed on is that there just happens to be this little machine that builds cell membrane, and all the new cell is basically doing is giving it a piece of the original. You know what I mean? So it's a huge cheat. They're not the new life form doesn't have to build the cell membrane because it's given the hardware from the old one. It's given a piece and a little guy who makes that piece bigger. You know what I mean? It's like that part isn't a chromosome kind of thing. That part is a real, I'm just going to split in half and give you half my shit. You know what I mean? So that part of the cell division is still really primitive, in where it's almost like a cell is just sacrificing half of itself.
Right, and they said uh, in the press announcement that the cell was self-replicating, but I don't know how deep you want to get into this, but it if you cut a cell and you expose it to the if you cut a membrane and expose it to the surrounding medium, the whatever the surrounding medium is, you immediately upset the pH balance in that cell, and the electrolytic balance in that cell. So it becomes I don't know if I would I'm willing to go along with it. The formation of the cell membrane and replication is quite that simple. Like I said, from what I've read, that's actually one of the more complicated uh, parts of cell division.
Yeah,
But
why
I
I
don't want
just
to
don't
touch
think
that.
it's I don't think it's
It's not
the
my
more
area of
complicated part. I
expertise.
think it's the more primitive part. And but yeah, it's definitely complicated, but the nothing has to build it, because it's always just like, you know what I mean, the cell membrane that all your cells are made out of, it's really old. You know what I mean? Like that bakeries that use like sourdough bread, and like the bacteria are 700 years old. It's like, that structure might be really, really old, because we just keep passing on. The cells just keep giving a piece of themselves up. And yeah, they keep making more and more of it, but they keep giving up the original design, the original structure. So, when a cell divides, it's quite literally giving up half its structure, or a piece of its structure. And so the new cell only has to grow based on that structure it's given. But anyway, that's a whole nother. The point here is that, yeah, but the real key point is it wasn't synthetic life, because all it did was accept a piece of chromosome. They put in a new piece of chromosome, it accepted it, and it reproduced it, but it did nothing else. They did not build a life form. They did not create a living thing. They did not create something that can reproduce itself. They modified stuff that can reproduce itself. That's all they did.
Right, I agree. Do you remember? Did they actually use the term synthetic life? Do you?
I mean, that's what they called it. We invented synthetic life.
Okay, yeah, I
That was
think
their headline.
yeah, it's overblown.
So howdy there, hit for a guy, hit for a day guy, whatever your name is. Height, you need a name, like some kind of regular name. That name is just
Just it.
Just, yeah, okay, I'll call you Justin then.